Welcome to the Purpose Focused Advisor, a podcast for financial planners, advisors, and RIAs looking to get the most out of yourself and your business. Join Rob Brown and Phil Calandra as they walk you through a journey that will allow you to take action in your business and your life so you can be the best that you can possibly be. Now here are your hosts, Rob and Phil.
Okay, welcome back to the Purpose Focused Advisor. Rob Brown here, along with my co-host and friend, Phil Calandra. And we're really lucky today to have with us someone I consider to be a leader in the industry, Jeff Concepcion from although technically he's in Beechwood, I consider him to be a Cleveland guy now. And he is the founder and CEO of Stratos Wealth Partners, a fast-growing firm with an entrepreneurial spirit. And we're going to talk more about that entrepreneurial spirit in a minute, but Jeff has grown a fantastic firm. It's growing quickly, bringing in lots of advisors who really aspire to run entrepreneurial businesses so that they're able to serve their clients in the best way possible. Jeff, I don't know if you want to add anything to that introduction as we get started.
No, I think that's terrific. Yeah, we can just brainstorm around a little bit of maybe the origin of why, and then entrepreneurship. Those sound like some great topics.
Yeah, so why don't you just go ahead and start there, Jeff? You know, why did you build this thing that you built? Because it started small. I know some of your co-founders, and there weren't very many of you when you first got started, and your advisor count is in excess of 200 now, I believe.
Yeah, somewhere between 300 and 400. Yep.
Oh, wow.
I think the goal was, supported independence was an overused and sort of unfulfilled promise, I think, to a degree. And the analogy that I use being Midwest based in Cleveland, Ohio, is if you look at two Ford F-150s from, 50 yards away, they look identical. But when you lift up the hood, I think a lot of firms in our industry that talk about supported independence have got a moped engine under the hood. And there are a few, not many, that have got an 8-cylinder, diesel engine. So it's supported independence that's robust and meaningful and impactful, that can really help the advisor be independent where they want to be and supported where they need to be. And particularly the breakaway teams, they don't even really know exactly what that means. They know they want control, they want autonomy, but that doesn't typically mean that they want to be responsible for real estate, HR, benefits, billing, regulatory aspects. So that was kind of the premise.
Right. Yeah, because independent sounds good until you realize that there's more to independence than you may have initially thought, depending on where you're coming into that environment. So talk a little bit about that. What is that? What does that independence look like today? Is that? I mean, we're using a different phraseology when we talk about that entrepreneurial spirit. But what are advisors really looking for when they say, I want to be independent?
I think it's control. I think if you come from the wires and the banks, as soon as they understand how they get compensated, it changes. There are mandates that trickle in that don't necessarily meet theirs or their clients' objectives with cross-sell obligations and all kinds of stuff. There's just not a lot of control. I think people want to control their environment, what their focus is. I think they want to control how their money gets invested. So if you look at, again, I'm just starting with the wires and banks, and we can migrate to other aspects of the industry. But if you're taking, on average, 55 cents of my money and spending it in ways that in many cases don't relate to what I think my needs are, my team's needs, my clients' needs are, giving them control means we're going to give you the lion's share of the revenue that you generate. And with the very small portion that we take, we're going to be really good stewards, and we're going to provide more value to you than the firm that took, more than half of your revenue. So control, I think, is branding, it's client experience, it's the tools that they use. It's where they want to invest in their business. It's those types of things that they want to control. What they don't realize is that the mothership might have been doing a lot of things for them that need to get done, but that would be a tremendous distraction if they tried to wear 8 or 9 hats that some other larger enterprise was wearing for them previously.
Sure.
So yeah, this is interesting, Jeff. I think too, becoming an entrepreneur and being independent is something that's ingrained in a lot of advisors, some not so much. When you're working in Stratos, how do you maintain culture and the discipline of the culture that you desired, at the same time giving them, the autonomy and the independence to be their true entrepreneurial self?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the shorter answer is the bigger you get, the harder it is to maintain, candidly. I mean, anybody who wouldn't say that would be lying.
Yeah.
I chatted with a couple ladies today who've joined the team in the last year, and they're terrific on our leadership team. Back in the day, no one came to the firm. And when I say back in the day, it wasn't 15 years ago, it was 3 years ago, unless I met them, because I wanted to make sure that the mindset of serving advisors and helping them succeed and the cultural fit was there. Well, knocking on the door of 1,000 people, it's not practical anymore. So culture becomes a challenge. I think part of it is memorializing and writing, which we didn't do as well in early years and we do better today. You know, who are we? Entrepreneurs supporting entrepreneurs. What's our niche? Accelerating advisor growth and productivity. What are our values? And stating those 5 values that everybody knows. So it becomes more systematizing and publishing and reminding what those core values are. When you can't quite touch every aspect of the business, it's not practical at 100 bodies, let alone 1,000. So how do you make sure that that stuff is there? I try to stop and pause. So the interns were shocked. I took them in groups of 3 and we went for breakfast together for an hour. And sort of small cores of employees that I don't know as well as people who have been tenured, grabbing lunch and chatting and learning about their families and their values, letting them hear my views of why we exist and what our goal is and what success is. And to me, success is simple. Our partner firms are succeeding. If they're not succeeding, we're failing. There's nothing else. We got to run a good, clean regulatory business, and people who affiliate have to have better experiences, better process, and better growth than their peers. And if they're not, we're failing. So as they hear those things, you do the best that you can through consistency and messaging to reinforce what those values and what that culture is. So
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
that's so good. Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
no, finish your thought, Phil.
I was just going to say, one of the things that I heard you say that really stuck with me was kind of systematizing, because all advisors listening to us right now, I wouldn't say all, majority want to scale. We want to do better. We want to do well by doing good. I love the way you say that. And systematizing, creating a process, creating a structure and an environment doesn't only happen in a boutique firm. It can be scaled the same way you're building a, 8, 10, 12 billion-dollar firm. I love the way you said that. Systematizing and a process for scaling is got to be it.
yeah, and it's not my nature, by the way, in the least, right? So
It's none of ours as
yeah,
advisors.
some people are process driven, and I'm not. That's not my thing. So I think our team sort of chuckled and was frustrated a couple of years ago when I said we need something to create more structure in the enterprise. And you guys are probably familiar with EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, traction. So when I suggested that, they're like under their breath saying he's not going to show up every, and I did, and we do. And the level of clarity and communication about what matters most. We've got 20 things that we're working on. We don't get these 6 done this quarter, we failed. So that's systems and process. I just think businesses become unwieldy, or they become some watered down version of what they could be, absent complete clarity, structure, and process around what matters most, how are we going to get it done, and most importantly, who owns it, who's accountable. So it's been a blessing for us because I think our team was more process oriented, but as the leader, I was not. And they might argue to some extent I'm still not, but we've come along. It's always a work in progress, but we're making progress and we're coming along. So
So good. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that because that's a big focus of the work we do with our clients is really helping them understand what matters most. Because then you can make decisions and you can systematize because you know you're working towards something that is really and truly important to you. It's not just fly by night, running the business, seat of the pants, kind of operation. And I think um, in my experience, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's certainly north of 50% of advisors are not process people. They may be process people with the financial plans they're putting out for their clients, but when they take that back to their business, they aren't process oriented to say, let's stop and let's put a process in place. Sounds like it's going to be stifling, when in the end it really creates that freedom and the opportunity to really be that entrepreneur who grows the business faster than your peers.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And it goes back to what you talked about earlier, that concept of entrepreneurship. A great advisor is not necessarily a great CEO, nor should they be, because they never had to be. They were coddled inside of some type of a enterprise that did a lot of things for them. And when they go out on their own, they need coaching on how to be a great CEO. This is the kind of work that you guys do day to day, right? On how to be a great CEO, how to invest in talent, how to forego current earnings to reinvest in technology and things that are going to help them go to the next level. So supporting all that type of thinking and teaching them how to become a great CEO and business owner, which is very, very different from being a great advisor. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's kind of the old adage, are you working in your business or are you working on your business? And for many people, being able to work on the business is just not going to make the business more successful. It may be a detriment. So that's where you come in.
No, it makes good sense.
So, talking about this transition to the entrepreneurial spirit, Jeff, what are the things that, as you talk to advisors, they crave help with the most? I mean, you mentioned, some of the things you're able to do for your advisor, but what are they looking for the most right now? And I ask that because as I talk to advisors, I'm seeing a trend more and more towards advisors wanting to farm out who manages their clients' assets, because they want to focus more on client service or on financial planning. But 5 years ago, I mean, it's cyclical. Somebody else managing the money was like the worst thing in the world, because you were going to ruin your reputation because you turned the money over to another manager who screwed it up. And I find this kind of goes in cycles, but it seems the cycle is kind of out now.
Yeah, we have a super successful team visiting today from Tennessee. And, one of the things that we talked about is the ceilings of complexity that people hit, how many hats you wear when you start off as a young advisor, from prospecting to paperwork to design to portfolio. I mean, you're doing, 15 or 20 things. And I think advisors have to fire themselves perpetually till they come down to the one thing that they can do for the practice that no one else can do. And I think they've thought about this, but in the conversation we just had an hour or two ago, the one advisor is business development. That person is highly skilled at, as they said, falling into opportunities to bring on new business. The other person is highly skilled at the sensitivity around the relationship management, collaboration, and follow-up. But there are still a dozen things that need to get done. So they're still managing money on their own. So what is it that's not your highest and best use? And what is it that someone else can likely do as well or better? Some advisors, but I would argue a very, very small minority, are really exceptional portfolio managers. But how could they compare what they're going to do over time, 95% of them, to a team of CFAs that are studying the markets, they're doing earnings calls with, that's not an easy job to do if you're doing it with 10% of your time at best, right? So having the maturity and the willingness and the resources to continually fire yourself. If you fire yourself, then you're hiring someone else. That can be insourcing or outsourcing, but it's making those decisions and those investments and having the clarity to focus that the firms that you see go from 1 to 2 million, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 10 million plus. I'm shocked at how many individual advisor practices we have today that are doing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 plus $million in revenue, because they've focused their energies and they've surrounded themselves either by in or outsourcing with the appropriate talent. Portfolio management's one of them. It's commoditized, right? And most advisors, I'm going to say that there are unique one-offs. Most of them won't do as good consistently over time as a great asset management team. And whether they use a team that we built internally or an outside manager, it's hard for me to understand why someone would wrap their arms around that when they think about other things that they could do that would create more value. So.
Yeah, I think you boiled it down when you said, maturity. That becomes maturity as an owner, as a leader, as somebody that's trying to scale a firm. It's recognizing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then being mature and checking the ego at the door and saying, "Hey, I need support. I'm going to turn over the training, the trading keys. I'm going to go find a paraplanner. I'm going to have somebody take the benefits off my plate." All those different things come with maturity for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is hard to do sometimes. Part of it's emotional and ego, and the other part of it's financial, right? So if you're running a practice and you have $1 million in revenue and you go out and hire a trader for 80 grand plus benefits, that's $100,000. Your income
Right.
is going backwards. And what's harder to see is if you hire the right person and you use some fragment of that, doesn't have to be all of it. You free up 10 hours a week. Let 5 hours of it be personal for your family. Let the other 5 go into something that really drives value. In a year or two, they're going to be making more money. And I'll relate my own experience with that. There were years where in a good year, we bring on, $1.5 billion to $2 billion in assets is what we would do in a good year. And we see our earnings up like 2%, 3%, terrible, terrible. But in those years, what I took for granted is all the infrastructure, technology, and people investments that we made. And what happens a year later when you sort of digest those investments and leverage those tools and people, now the earnings shoot up 37%. So it's that delay that comes back to the maturity that you talked about, Phil. It's that delayed gratification to know I'm going to take a step back, but if I'm wise and choose well, I'm going to take 3 or 4 steps forward when we catapult and benefit from the trader or whatever resource it is we're bringing in.
Right.
So when you think about those resources, we've talked about the portfolio management side of things, the trading side of things. What are some of the things, the other top things that advisors are looking to take off their table or should be looking to take off, where you really see that growth explode?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I mean, one might be financial planning. I mean, I hung my hat on being an extremely adept advisor in my youth. I didn't have any contacts. I came to a cold market that I had never been in before. So I felt if I knew as much or more than the CPAs and the estate tax attorneys, which I did in relatively short order, just because I studied it immensely. And so I was hanging my hat on that technical competency. That still wouldn't necessarily be my highest and best use, right? So having a great CFP, or depending on the size of your practice, you could even have, attorney on staff. So turning over the planning, whether it's the plan construction, the design, portfolio management we talked about, marketing. So it's not that most firms just aren't doing much of it. It's not that, and unless you have a certain amount of scale. So can you hire an internal marketing person who's doing events? I spoke to someone the other day, and they hired a firm where they're just doing an exceptional job on knowing the anniversaries and the birth dates and the retirement date and the date that someone's spouse passed away to recognize and reach out with a personal touch. They're leveraging technology that's telling them to make these outreaches versus them trying to track it manually the way that they used to. Client experience and engagement. So you've got widowed clients and people are bringing these groups together. They're bringing in speakers on health and wellness and travel. We have one firm that they asked their clients, what are the 3 most painful things that you do? One of them was around health. Not surprisingly, another one was car buying. They now identify and they'll actually make the purchase given the parameters from the client. So you find all these little unique niche things teetering all the way up to something that would feel like a family office. Bill pay, managing properties for higher net worth clients who have multiple residences. And so there's a gamut from the simple to the complex. And the bigger people get, foregoing a little bit of EBITDA today to drive that raving client experience, which results in referrals and future growth. I think these firms that kind of push the boundaries a little bit and reinvest are the ones that have pretty much unlimited upside.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
love the
good.
way you say that because I think if I oversimplified what you said, invest in creating a client's experience that nobody else can match, and have the team in place to support that, and the firm can't help but grow. I've always believed that
Exactly.
how you the clients you decide to take on and how you treat them is the main driver to growth. But it's easy to get away from that if you're putting on your green eye shades to manage the portfolio, or you don't have time to really create a full financial plan for them, and you're just kind of mailing it in. Let's change directions here as we begin to land the plane. Jeff, I know that you've been very active out in the world, letting people know what you're doing at Stratos and bringing advisors on board. And that's a big topic for advisors today. I can't remember any other time in the industry when what does my succession plan look like? Should I um, sell my firm? What do you see in that world right now? What are the decisions that people are making or they should be thinking about? Because too often in the past, advisors have probably waited too long to think about it. They think, well, I'll know when I'm ready and then I'll start the process, which is too late. And then maybe today, because there's a lot of money flying around out there, they're thinking about it too soon and they really aren't prepared to make the transaction today when they could invest a little bit more time and energy into what they're doing to increase the value before they start taking the offers.
Yeah, you said a lot there, and there's a lot of real substance. So the way I say something that you essentially said as well is people assume succession is an event when in fact it's a process. It's not something you decide to do. It's something that you thoughtfully work towards over a period of a couple of years if you want to have a good outcome. I think there's a lot of misconception. In the past, people would, and in a smaller practice, still today it holds true. You talk about multiples of gross revenue, when in fact, with any size or scale, you're talking about a multiple of EBITDA or EBOC. People get excited when they hear these crazy top line numbers about firms trading at 15 or 20 times earnings. Yes, if you have $30 billion, no, if you have 300 million, but they hear the number and they assume that it applies. I think that people struggle with the notion of, and this is a big one, internal constituents as opposed to an external investor. The internal constituents don't always necessarily have the resources. They can't pay the same multiple, but there's so much there in terms of locking down that next gen and the connection and culture and rewarding the. So what I tell people is you assume that you have to either sell inside or sell outside. You're wrong. Some of the best transactions we see are hybrid. So you bring in kind of a gentle institutional partner that trains and coaches and brings resources and sell a stake to your internal stakeholders. So some combination of those two things can create really, really cool outcomes. I spoke to somebody today from Pennsylvania, and they, like many others, get hung up with all the decisions that need to be made. And what I said to them is, here's how we would insert ourselves in the process. We have 9 offices in Pennsylvania. So if you decide that culturally there's a fit with us, let us structure the economics, right? Let us determine the value and the structure of the deal. Once we have that locked down through a letter of intent, then play the dating game. I'm going to introduce you to 3 or 4 teams that the more I learn about you, I feel could be a great fit. But when you're thinking about price and structure and terms and fit, sometimes they get so mired, they do nothing because it's just overwhelming. So break it down into pieces and parts that you can digest. Is this a fair number and a fair structure that I'm comfortable with? Is this a firm that has like values? And then who's the person that actually is going to execute and sit beside me with my clients? What's complex a lot of times about selling your business is if you sell your home, today I own it and tomorrow Phil's own it. Phil owns it. He took the keys and he moved in. With succession, I'm selling my house to Phil and he and I are actually living in that house together for several years through a transition. So there's just a sensitivity around fit and culture because it's different, the fact that we're going to sit alongside. So there's just a lot to digest. And there's also a massive, massive winding down of our aging advisor force. So you're seeing that bell curve flip where you had tons and tons and tons of buyers and very few sellers. Now you're finding fewer and fewer young people and lots of people in the next 5 years that are going to exit. So I said a lot, but that's kind of a stream of consciousness. So.
Yeah, that was really helpful because I think that covered a lot of the things that that advisors are thinking about. I had a great success story with a client this week. He sent me an email and thanked me that I suggested to him in forming a partnership that they practice for a year before they formalize the agreement. And where I was thinking, I wasn't able to help him bring the partnership across the threshold. It just didn't work out. So it was a failure. He looked at it as a success because if we hadn't forced it to work, he would have just been unhappy and it would have been harder to work his way out of it. So really taking the time to get to know that firm, that person that you want to to partner with really becomes essential, because that culture does matter, and you can't just take a Colby test and say, hey, look, our numbers all match up.
That's good advice.
Phil, anything to add in there as we bring this to a close?
I don't think so. I've enjoyed this conversation, Jeff. Where can folks listening connect with you? Is it LinkedIn, website? How can people, me included, connect with you?
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn. Jeff Concepcion, Stratos Wealth Partners is the website, and we have a podcast as well, which I was thrilled to have Rob on. He shared some great insights from the work that's being done at his firm, and so the podcast is the Evolving Advisor Podcast. But any of those places, people will get a sense as to some of the stuff that we're working on.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. And the Evolving Advisor podcast is not just because I had an opportunity to be part of it. It is another.
Although you were
podcast.
arguably one of the best guests, if we can, very thoughtful, very thoughtful.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's we live. Well, let me close this way. I think that one thing that we can say about the three men on this call is we are cheerleaders for this industry and for the advisors in this industry and the impact they can make on the lives of so many people. And if we get it right, that just expands exponentially. And we play different roles in it, but that's where we need to be. We need to be cheerleaders for the industry, true fans of the industry, so that clients are getting the help that they need from the people that can deliver it the best, and can do that in a way that they're really enjoying the careers that they're building to serve those clients.
Undoubtedly, we're in a great space. I thank God every day. I'm so pleased with what I do and the people I do it with. It's a lot of fun, lots of opportunity. So
I'm with you on that.
Well, Jeff, we'll end the show here by reminding our listeners that, as always, we are rooting for your success, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Purpose Focused Advisor. If you want to learn more, head over to our website, truestfancoaching.com. There you'll learn all about becoming a purpose-focused advisor. You'll also find today's show notes and links to the other gifts and resources we talked about during the episode. Again, thanks for listening, and remember, we're rooting for your success.